So I grew up playing the game. At age 10, I grew up kind of rough, in and out of foster homes and stuff. And I was taken in by a family from Red Lake. They moved back to Red Lake. I moved with them, and it was the first time I had been in a home that prioritized education and it was sober, and a traditional Ojibwe environment. So it was one of those things. I was indoctrinated into a Ogichida society. I think it was the last cohort. I was the youngest one in that group. But with that was Moccasin games. So older men teach young men how to be men. Older women teach younger women how to be women. But with Moccasin game, it was a kind of a conduit for men to get together and to play the game and stuff. So with the game, I learned it the older way of learning it. So I watched for a long time, and then I helped with everything. And then my opening into it was Lee Lusher Senior. One time had the shits, and they were teasing him. He got some deer meat off a run over deer while he got sick off it. But anyway, he was watching marbles in the watching position, and he says, I'm gonna be in the bathroom for a while, take my spot, and then that was my step into the game, my invite, and I mastered that position. Then I went on to master all the other ones. Then I formed my own team with my brothers and my cousin, and we still played all together since high school. We kind of stay with the same ones. We got different subs. We sub in and out since then. So with the game, what happened was I worked a career in law enforcement, and then I started teaching Ojibwe language and culture. During my time, I went from when I was a kid, the little bit of Ojibwe I knew was because there was homes around my house in Bukwakwan, which is the West End area of Red Lake, where you got there, like John Hill, there were Leo DeJarli, some of these ones where you would actually get there and it was Ojibwe in the home. You had to leave English at the doorstep. And so you had to function on your own. And my beginning was people would say stuff, and I'd go tell my grandma Fanny, they said this, and she said they were saying this, and then say this back. And that's how it started. So anyway, I went from that to having to know some, to the point at the end of my law enforcement career, there was nobody there. There was one fluent speaker left in the Kwakong area, Wabaguneash, and he passed away, I think 7 years ago. So I seen a decline of language and culture, to the point of I didn't think there was a need for Ojibwe teachers, to the point we got to save the language, and I never planned on teaching her. I think I would have done more things. So with Moccasin game, one of the things my undergrad was in criminal justice. I didn't have the pedagogy, so I got put in a classroom. My brother had been a teacher for 20 some years. He said, assess your students, see where they're at, teach from there. So anyway, I was at Waban, Minnesota, and there was block periods. There was 96 minutes or something. And I was like, you can only cover so much Ojibwe, So I was like, you know what? I'm going to teach these guys Moccasin games. So we started playing, and it took off like really good, it really took off. And I wrote the only book that's on Ojibwe style Moccasin game, or on Moccasin game, any style of Moccasin game. But anyway, when I'm teaching it, you need to, like you have a degree that sets you in a classroom to be a teacher, but in our traditional environment, you had to have sat with certain people. Like I highlighted my teachers that I sat with and stuff, where I gained the authority to sit in my position. So with Moccasin game, I wanted to teach. If I'm going to teach it, I should teach the whole thing, starting from the legend. And one thing I found is that through teaching, that when I teach the legend and the spiritual part of it, that players grow up to be better players and actually care more for the game, and then are more respectful with the game. People that have got into it and learned in treatment centers or learned on the fly somewhere, they know the game, but it seems a little more disrespectful. Like my students always come back after playing in tournaments saying, holy shit, I can't believe these guys act like that. Can't believe they didn't start with tobacco. I can't believe they didn't use any language. So starting this way in a good way is really what I think being our people is all about and stuff. So part of that is the legend. So I heard bits and pieces when I was little. Every once in a while, some old guy would share a piece of the legend and about the game. And I was never gifted the legend. No one ever sat down with me and said, here's the legend, spiritually, with tobacco, gift, and a feast. So what happened was I started teaching. So I was like, I got to get this legend. So I called around, and all the guys I knew, Doc Jones, Fred Jackson, Gabe Hayden, Stan Nelson, all these guys that I knew the legend are all gone. And the younger guys were like, oh man, I don't know, I only remember pieces too. I tracked down only two guys out of Ojibwe country that still knew this legend. So I called one of them up in Northwest Bay, and he said, you know what, you'll have to come up. He said, bring me $500, come up, be prepared to stay a few days. And then I didn't have any money. I had retired from law enforcement, paid a bunch of stuff off, so I was broke, and I was a beginning teacher. So that was out of the question. The other guy, Ojibwe Moccasin, I called him. Took me a while to get a hold of him, but I called him one night, and I finally got him to answer, and asked him about the legend, and he says, yeah, he says, I haven't told it in a while, and kind of asked, first off, they always ask, well, who are you? Before the conversation, that's what our protocols are all about. So and then when he found out that when I told him I had a white father, but I have a native mother, but I don't know that other side of the family, and he was kind of, that's a term we saw today, so it's kind of, he was kind of turned off. He was like, I don't know, I'm nobody plays anymore. It's probably just died. It's probably why tell it. So I had to convince him. I said, hey man, I said, we still playing Red Lake, they playing Roseau River. I'm teaching kids how to play it, but I want to do it the right way. I want to start with the legend, how we should do everything. And he was kind of turned off by it. And then he kind of went on to ask, well, who's your mom? So I said, my mom Cheryl Lisi, daughter of Fred Lisi and Bernice Gijig. So it turns out my grandma Bernice is his cousin. So things kind of changed. He was like, okay, all right, come up so-and-so day. And he says, you know how to do this right. And I said, yeah, I do. So what I did is we said it was like 3 weeks later. I went up to his house. It was a 4-hour drive. And I brought as many blankets as I could get. I had this big pile of blankets, as much money as I could get together. I cooked a feast up and brought it. Some other gifts. I brought another speaker with me, just in case, anything. Then my brother and my cousin came with me. Then we drove up to his house, and and I presented the gifts and everything. He smoked his pipe. His brother was there. They pulled out a bear hide. They did ceremony, and then he told the legend. So the legend took 3 hours to tell. We actually had like 3 different breaks in there with the legend. The reason it took so long is he told it in Ojibwe. And I'm gonna translate it just real quick for you if we have time. And then with the Atazukan, with the Ojibwe legends, when you tell a legend, you start this time of the year, like we'd start right now, and then we talk through a whole year of what Ojibwe do, what they traditionally did. And then when you get to this time of the year in a year, then you start your legend. That's why some of the legends go so long, But anyway, so he was told in Ojibwe, and he says, I can only give it to you in Ojibwe. He says, if you choose to translate to English, you can do that. That's on you. But I got to tell it in Ojibwe, and I'm glad he did, because there was bits and pieces I missed, and then another speaker was there, so we kind of went over it after. So I'm gonna tell you an 8-minute version of 3 hours. And I think some of it I missed in places too and stuff. And if it's in my book also, I got broken in 2 parts in my book. When I get done with my next degree year, I think I'm gonna make a second edition with maybe like what you guys are working on, some instructional things on teachers being able to help or teach the game. Because where it sits, if you don't, I've been called from Onamia, Fond du Lac, Red Lake, other places where they want to incorporate Moccasin game, but you have to have a master player in the classroom. Otherwise, it doesn't get off the ground. It's the most Ojibwe language is the most complex language in the world, but the game, I believe, is also the most complex. Also, all games you play, like not only the video games, but basketball, football, checkers, chess, those are all someone else's games, somebody else's games. This is our game. A lot of times when you hear old guys who talk about this game, they say our game, as ours. So us as Ojibwe, it's really, really old game. Do I got time for the legend piece of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you like a little snapshot of the legend. I'm gonna try to it'll be a little quicker than usual, but it's basically this guy, he was a young man, had a wife and a kid, very young man, and he in the legend he just lived as a normal Ojibwe, and then his wife and daughter died. Legend didn't say how they died. They passed. They had the funerals for him and stuff. And then in the legend, he's stricken with grief, like really bad grief, and he's starving himself, and he's kind of like wanting to go on to the next world to be with his family. So anyway, his family's trying to cheer him up. They're trying to help him with grief instructions, and he heads out like early one morning while everybody's sleeping. He heads out in the woods, and he just keeps walking and walking, walks for days and days. He loses track. And he's down to the point where his clothes are kind of torn up, everything's hanging on him. He's really, kind of bad looking and stuff, rough looking. And in the legend, there's pieces of it. There's one where a deer. So when we hunt, Deer and animals, they take pity on us. They give themselves to us. It's not like we go and take their lives. So they actually bless us. But the deer sees them and walks up to him and it like stands in front of him, trying to give itself to him, and he refuses his deer's generosity. He actually has to like walks up to the deer, won't move, and he has to walk around it to keep going. Another time, a partridge runs under his feet. He's trying to trip him up and get killed by him, so he'd have something to eat. And he refuses all these different money to see him. And they try to help him, but anyway, he's going through the woods and he's going, and he hits this point where he comes through a little field in the woods, and he gets in the middle, and he's from exhaustion. He falls down, and he's laying there for a long time. And when he's laying there, he hears footsteps coming in the woods. Gets closer and closer. Pretty soon he can tell it's human. And he's thinking in his head, I hope this is, I've walked so far, it must be an enemy territory. I hope it's an enemy warrior. They can kill me, send me to the next world. Anyway, it's a guy comes up to him and he speaks to him. And the guy says, leave me alone, kill me or leave, and he goes on to tell him what he's doing, why he's there. His wife and kid are gone. I want to pass to the next world. I want to be with them. And then he keeps talking to him, and this guy says, geez, that must be hard and stuff. And talks to him about, about living a life. He goes over grief instructions and says, before you know it, you're going to be there. The rest of your family will be there. And, you're here for a purpose. You're here for, they're okay over there. Their money due now, their spirits. It gives him kind of those grief instructions again and stuff. And he starts talking and says, hey, he says, I have something. You can bring it back to the people. I can't bring your wife and kid back, but I can give you something that'll bring you some happiness again. It'll draw people together. It'll take care of people. So he tells him it's a game. And he has this knapsack. He pulls this sack off and unrolls it, and there's a game set, a moccasin game set. So he takes out the moccasins, the counters, the pegs, shooting stick. That's your first shooting stick. They say it was just from your shoulder to the tip of your middle finger. Then he put out a drum, and he took the drumstick out, and he was singing a song. Showed him a couple of songs. He laid the game out and went over the game with them, and then they packed it back up. He fed this guy. He before they went over the game, he said, we should eat something. And he had a little bag of stuff. They called it something the guys would carry with them in the woods when they went, because he walked everywhere. Like choke cherries, deer meat dried up and stuff. But anyway, the guy ate it. And he had some tea with them. And that guy said it was like medicine. All of a sudden he started feeling better, and like energy and stuff. And then he once he ate and stuff, he was feeling way better. And then he told him the game, and then actually told him how the game would go, and then gave predictions about the game, that it would go out through Ojibwe country, and it would change in certain places, and other nations might adopt it also. Anyway, so he rolls the game up, and the guy says, I don't know where I'm at. I don't even know how to get home. And he tells him there was a birch tree, and he says, you see that distant birch tree? He said, walk to that and just keep going. In 2 days' time, you'll be home. So the guy gave him the stuff, gave him the directions, and he walked the way he came. And he took 4 steps, and his legs down were black fur. Another 4 steps, his waist was black fur down. Another 4 steps, his shoulders was all black fur. Then another 4 steps, it went down, and I looked back, and it was a bear, a muckwa, and it ran off into the woods. So the guy knew right then that something spiritual had happened. And then he took off. He went to that birch tree and then kept going. And 2 days later, the second day in the morning, he was walking, and when the sun came up, just as the sun came up, he was back in the village. So he gets to the village, and then there was people there, and his dad was, everybody was worried about him, and they were telling him, holy man, we thought you were dead, and and stuff. People were looking for you. And they take him to his father's wigwam, and then everybody welcomed him. He ate, and then he tells his dad what happened. And his dad said, this is something spiritual. So he says, you need to do exactly what that bear told you to do. And he told him to that when he got back, to make 7 game sets, and then to make a special lodge for it, and told him how it was going to be built, and told him that that he would dream of the first 7, the first players, and to gift them a game set and tobacco them and show them how to play the game. So I guess it took him 2 days to make all the game sets and the wigwam, and then he dreamt of those first boys of that would play. So he went to tobacco, and he got them together, and I guess they played all night the first night. I guess 7 days, 7 nights in a row they got together, and they played the first games of Moccasin game. And then so at that time it was called Mukwatage. I guess it was called Mukwatage up until, it sounds like not too soon before, reservation era, it was changed the Moccasin game because of the Moccasin game pads. And then it was played at night mainly, and then it switched, you can play it during the day. And then there was, old instructions of to have a game at funerals and stuff like that. It was helps with grief and stuff in life. So anyway, they say those first boys, they speculate they lived 150 to 200 years old. Those first boys at that, like that bear said they would take care of them. So the game takes care of its players and stuff. And I want to add in that the first time I taught the game to a group was with my brother. He had a contract through the rehab in Red Lake, and he had to meet with boys. He met with I think it was 12 boys twice a week for 10 weeks. They were court ordered to this culture class. And my brother, I was in law enforcement at the time, but my brother called and says, "Hey, I got to teach this stuff in the contract. Do you think you can stop in and help me teach Moccasin game and cover some language?" So I did, and then my captain let me do one of the days while I was on duty. But we taught these boys, and it was, we completed the contract and stuff, and it wasn't too much later, a few months, I was up testifying in a trial, and the head judge pulled me aside and said, "Hey," he said, "you know that thing you and your brother did." He said, "Those boys, I just wanted to say," he said, "I've never had a group court order to one of those groups that never committed that didn't commit any crimes again." And so he thought he said, "Whatever you guys were doing, whatever you showed him," he says, "was pretty cool." He said, "I've never seen that, but none of them committed, reoffended while they were in our program." And it made me think of the legend, because it says it takes care of the players and stuff. And all those old guys I talked about, Fred Jackson, Doc Jones, Gabe Hayden, Stan Nelson, all these guys lived to be really, really old themselves with the game. So it's really strong there. And then I think as teachers, just as like, so you know that as you teach the legend and the spiritual part, the game is more respected than what we kind of see out there now. You'll see at some tournaments where there's a lot of swearing, a lot of even now where, me and my brothers are talking about, there's been a few altercations where people get really mad, and it's not our Ojibwe way of doing things, and what the game teaches us. Even the old teaching I used to hear when I was a kid was, even if you lose a game, you win. I think I'm starting to see that now as I'm older man now, that it really is, even though you lose the game, you're still a winner because you're there, I don't know if I got time to get into there's a Sioux version that we gifted this to the Dakota Nation, and they play a down version of us. They only go to one section. We got two sections where you find highs, and then the game gets more complex. Mm-hmm. So I won't cover that, but it's in my book. If you ever see one and get it, I think Tony has one. Look for my second updated version, so it'll have some curriculum stuff in there. But we'll play the game for now, so you can see it. Be mindful too; it's really complex, and the only way to learn this is to play it. You could sit there and listen to it and watch it, and you won't get it unless you play it. So.
Yeah, and something else just to add with what Charlie's sharing here. You might have noticed, well, the first thing is, who are you and where are you from? What's your dodame? That kind of stuff. So it's, like if you imagine Ojibwe people, we got 141 First Nations in Canada. We're across several US states. There isn't one Ojibwe culture. It's a collection of interrelated cultural groupings. So the first thing you do is kind of like, assume, but you can be explicit too when you're teaching. You can say, there's no one right way. Here's my name, here's where I'm from, and here's what I was taught. And then it's the Ojibwe version of footnotes. Here's who taught me, here are the other people who taught me, and where they taught me. And then it kind of grounds you in your teachings where you're coming from. So you're not saying, I know better than somebody else in this other community about how they should do things. You're just saying, this is what was given to me. And so that's customary. People usually do that when they're telling legends in the winter. They'll say, all right, I'm going to, here's who I am, and I'm going to share this legend. I received this one from so-and-so. So it's kind of like giving credit to your teachers, and it's also grounding you with humility and where your stuff's coming from. So it's a good example of like, I'm going to open up teaching, and here's the stuff to begin. So feel free to incorporate those understandings as you're developing your own lesson plans going forward. All right, they're going to show you the game a little bit.
Can I piggyback on it just a little bit? I just wanted to tell everybody too, like, because you're gaining instruction and maybe working on Ojibwe stuff. So that the legend now, I just shared it with you guys, even though it's a lesser version, I've just given something to you, and you heard the payment I made for that, right? I had to have a family connection, I paid in blankets, time, get a lot of stuff together. So don't dismiss that. I think it's a norm now where people think traditional stuff is you just give it to me. You send it to me in a text. You know, it's offending to hear that stuff. And you have, now that you got it, even though you didn't choose to be here in time, you still heard it, you have a responsibility to make this live on, to help with it and to keep it going, okay? Because I paid a lot for it, you know? And I think it was on the verge of being gone, like a lot of our other stuff. So it is serious, and remember that as you're designing things, be respectful of who you're learning it from, because they take that on themselves, and, you know, and it ain't only a gift, it's a gift of time, a gift of friendship, a gift of, because they're putting themselves online. As I mentioned, as my teachers, you know how many hours I put in with each one of them to learn what I got, help them at home and stuff. So please don't dismiss that. I think in education, we get caught up in instructional coaches are, well, hey, just go do this, go do that. When I'm the running around getting blankets and stuff. I remember Tony one time, I went to ask him if he had extra blankets because I was so broke. You know, like, hey, you remember that?
Yeah.
You know, I went and got a pile of blankets from him just to go around and get stuff. So I just wanted to piggyback on that. So please don't lose that. That is a part of who we are and how we do things. And some people made a sacrifice because the stuff was illegal. You know, and my grandma, I didn't get a chance to touch on that, but my grandma was, when I was in high school, was in her late 80s, and she was raised by her grandma, lived to be 108, and was alive during the Dakota battles. So, you know, that stuff is handed down, and it's before Chimoks were, you know, before colonization, before the arrival. And she used to call it the invasion. It was an invasion. It was like all of a sudden Bemidji was just full of different languages, different people, and it was a rough time for them. So it's a big thing, and people had to risk things to do that. My grandma used, if you look at the BIA circular, they say 7 Indian males constitutes a war party and they'd be arrested. My grandma was there and she said it's bullshit. Any 3 males constitute a war party and they'd arrest you. So to get together, Moccasin game was an underground thing. For those guys that I talked about, like took a chance with their freedom and living just to so we got this, you know? So this ain't only a privilege, this is a responsibility. So I wanna cast that over. As I get older, I'm talking more and more like this, but I think it is. If you're gonna be this way, you gotta put the work in and know the work and respect it, you know? So I just wanted to say that. It's at what we had to do. Now we'll get to the game. Any questions later on come up or anything, ask Tony. He knows how to play. He knows a lot about it also. And then he has contact information. Also, all my students, if you see them anywhere, any one of these guys can teach this complex game. And these are the only students at any high school on both sides of the border that can do this. Okay, so I just want to remind that too. Is pretty awesome.